The Metal Gear Solid Master Collection just released, so what's a better time than now for a big ol' Metal Gear Solid Iceberg video. In this video, we're going to be deep diving into the whole series, so if you want to avoid spoilers, but still want to hear the sultry, dulcet tones of my voice, might I recommend any of my other videos. Go check them out as well, and subscribe. For those not familiar with the concept of an iceberg, basically, it's just an excuse to talk about interesting little nuggets of information about a video game or whatever, and it starts with a shallow layer like, hey, did you know that Snake is based off of Kurt Russell's character from the Christmas Chronicles? As the iceberg gets deeper, you'll get more of those rare nuggets, and by the time you get to the very bottom, it's just dumb conspiracy theories and stuff that's really out there, but in a fun way. This is going to be fun, so put on your bandana, get inside your favorite cardboard box, and get comfy. Let's get started with the top layer of the iceberg. Snake vs. Monkey. First on our list of surface-level icebergs is a little minigame that older Metal Gear players will remember, but some newcomers might not have heard of.
Well, it's not quite a hot damsel in distress, but it is a rescue mission.
Rescuing who?
Apes.
What?
In this minigame, Naked Snake is tasked with hunting down the ape escape monkeys.
You said monkeys?
But don't worry, he only uses tranquilizers and stun grenades. R.I.P. Harambe. This was originally included on the PS2 copy of Snake Eater and its Subsistence upgrade, but wasn't carried over to the Essential Collection, or the HD Collection, or any other version of MGS3. And since we know the new Master Collection will be using the HD Collection version of Snake Eater, it's unlikely we'll ever see the Snake vs. Monkey game again. But wait! Jordan Voight Roberts has supposedly been writing a Metal Gear movie for some time now. Roberts made Kong Skull Island. So, is there a chance he'd throw in a scene of Oscar Isaac chasing some monkeys around? We can only hope. Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance included a ton of bonus stuff that die-hard fans could really get excited about, like a cutscene theater, a boss survival mode, a full-length documentary movie, and almost 500 freaking bonus missions just because. But Kojima apparently thought, not good enough, throw in a skateboarding minigame too. Evolution Skateboarding was Konami's take on Tony Hawk, but it kinda bombed, so the developers just said, whatever, slap the engine into Metal Gear, we're not using it anymore. Unfortunately, like the Snake vs. Monkey game, this also wasn't included in any future versions of MGS2, so you'll need the original Substance PS2 disc if you want to see Super Spy Solid Snake or Elite Agent Raiden shredding some wicked nar-nar. Johnny Sasaki ruins his khakis. Johnny is kind of a running joke of a character in the Metal Gear timeline. He was first introduced in Metal Gear Solid as a hapless guard that is knocked out and has his outfit stolen by Meryl, and then he goes off and has diarrhea. In MGS2, he's a guard working on the big shell, and he also goes off and has diarrhea. He has a huge story upgrade in Guns of the Patriots, where he joins up with Meryl as a member of her Rat Patrol team, but of course, he has diarrhea here too. Johnny's grandfather makes an appearance in Snake Eater as a guard in Groznygrad. He's tricked into letting Naked Snake out of his cell, much like how his grandson would later be tricked by Solid Snake. And, you guessed it, he has diarrhea. Johnny's character was based on Hideki Sasaki, the character model designer for the first MGS game. He apparently was a bit of a slack-off, and so the other developers threw Johnny into the game as a joke on Hideki. Poor guy, imagine being such a putz at your job that your coworkers put you into a game as a dude who shits everywhere and craps his pants all the time.
Someone's in the outhouse. Some soldier with stomach trouble? I think he's gonna be a while. Better leave him alone.
David Bowie references. This one is pretty well known and not particularly well hidden. Kojima apparently has great music taste, with MGS2 Substance being named after the New Order and Joy Division albums. That, along with the cassette tape selections from The Phantom Pain, should tell you this guy isn't messing around. I mean, having a helicopter extract you to the tune of Billy Idol's Rebel Yell is just awesome. So, of course, Kojima is going to be a fan of David Bowie too. In Snake Eater, Major Zero goes under the alias Major Tom. In MGS5, Venom Snake names his militia the Diamond Dogs, and The Man Who Sold the World is the theme song of that game. Solid Snake's real name is David. Ashes to Ashes and Space Oddity were originally going to be the end themes for Snake Eater. The list goes on. Metal Gear Solid alternate endings. This one is apparently common knowledge in the Metal Gear fandom, but brand new to me since I only ever got the happy ending. Did you know that the original Metal Gear Solid has 2 different endings? During the torture scene where Ocelot is zapping Snake, you could either overcome or submit. If you submit to the torture, it will radically affect the ending of the game. After defeating Liquid, Snake will discover that Meryl was killed while in captivity.
Meryl!
There's a pretty significant scene here where Snake doubts his whole meaning in life, and Otacon has to give him a pep talk to keep him moving.
People die, but death is not defeat. I lost Wolf too.
Otacon, shut up. Sniper Wolf didn't even love you. The final chase scene plays out the same, but with Otacon as your partner. They ride off into the sunset together, and it's truly a great bromance. When talking to Colonel Campbell, he reveals that Meryl was actually his daughter via an affair with his sister-in-law. On the other hand, if you withstood Ocelot's torture, you get the canonical ending, where Meryl survives and is the one to ride off into the sunset with Snake. Sadly though, some of Otacon's character growth and the reveal about Meryl's parentage are absent here, so it actually benefits the player to see both endings. There's also one last change that's pretty important. Both versions end with Ocelot revealing that not only was he the double agent, but that his real employer was none other than President of the United States, George Sears. In the Meryl Survives ending, extra dialogue is added, explicitly calling out the President as Solidus Snake. Pretty cool, considering Solidus Snake won't make his appearance until Metal Gear Solid 2, and the plot twist about him being President George Sears doesn't happen till later in that game. Crazy to think all these plot points could be missed if he simply didn't press the circle button fast enough. Meryl is from Policenauts. Speaking of Meryl, you might have heard that everyone's favorite Genome Soldier didn't originate on the first Metal Gear Solid. She's actually a character from an earlier Hideo Kojima game. Policenauts is a story about a police officer investigating the murder of his ex-wife and the disappearance of her current husband. Meryl is another officer that assists the protagonist on his journey, and Kojima was so smitten with Meryl's character that he copied her wholesale into Metal Gear Solid, including rehiring her original Japanese voice actor. Metal Gear Survive. This is a game I think most Metal Gear fans wish they could forget, but it's an interesting topic nonetheless. Metal Gear Solid 5 released in 2015, and it would be the last entry helmed by director Hideo Kojima. There was a lot of friction between Kojima and Konami, and if you want to learn more about that, there's plenty of videos and articles covering that drama. But afterwards, Kojima left to create a new production company, aptly named Kojima Productions. Meanwhile, Konami foolishly thought that they could keep the Metal Gear series going without its creator. Survive takes place between Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain. Immediately after the attack on Mother Base, a wormhole opens up in the sky for God knows why, and it sucks up a bunch of the Diamond Dog soldiers and transports them to a world full of zombies with crystal heads. Survive shamelessly took the Fox engine and assets from the Phantom Pain, slapped a couple new things onto it, and called it a brand new game. The character models, menus, terrain, basically everything else is recycled so that Konami wouldn't have to actually make anything new. Every mistake Konami could have made here, they did. For starters, they turned a smart political espionage thriller into a mindless survival horror game about zombies. Not understanding what makes the original great is pretty dumb already, but choosing to make it about zombies in 2018, when people were already pretty burnt out on the topic, is just a whole nother level of dumb. It's also a waste that they didn't just do a remake of the original 2 Metal Gear games using the new Fox engine. If they had went that route, they wouldn't need to create a new story without Kojima, and they would be able to bring those super old games into the future with the Phantom Pain's engine. Talk about a swing and a miss. The game flopped hard, and Konami seemingly learned their lesson and hasn't tried to mess much with the series since. time paradox. The Metal Gear series used to be told in chronological order, that is, until the release of Metal Gear Solid 3. It was the first game set earlier in the timeline, and after that, other entries in the series would also break the chronology. So, when players first experienced the Snake Eater storyline, we knew that certain things had to happen, and certain characters had to survive. So when the player gets a game over, if you wait long enough, the text will change to read Time Paradox. You may even hear the voice of Colonel Campbell lamenting how the future mustn't change.
Snake, what have you done? You changed the future. You've created a time paradox.
You'll get similar messages if Sokolov, Ocelot, or Eva are killed, as they are all instrumental in shaping the events of the series as a whole. Funnily enough, in the HD collection version of Snake Eater, if you kill Ocelot, you'll get a trophy called Problem Solved, Series Over. The time paradox joke carries over into Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain. You'll get it if you die during the mission at Camp Omega, and in Metal Gear Solid 5, if Kaz, Ocelot, Eli, or Huey die, you'll get a time paradox. And during the hospital escape, if Ishmael dies, you'll also get a time paradox. Interestingly, you don't get one if you, the player, dies. This is a huge hint, by the way, at a plot point we'll talk about later in the video. The Quiet Controversy. The Metal Gear series is a bit of a feminist paradox. On one hand, you have well-written, strong, and independent female characters like Meryl, Mei Ling, Fortune, Eva, the Boss, the list goes on. These characters are great role models and stand on their own and aren't just romantic devices for the male characters. That's all great. But on the other hand, the objectivization of these girls, or the option to, is also always present in these games. In Metal Gear Solid, Meryl can be seen in her underwear, and additional dialogue could be unlocked from ogling her. In Snake Eater, both Eva and the Boss have impractical, revealing outfits. Guns of the Patriots really upped the ante on sexism with the Beauty and the Beast unit, a series of boss fights where you take down the Beast and then the Beauty underneath. There's something odd about fighting these vulnerable, voluptuous women, especially knowing that they're all mentally ill and have experienced severe trauma in their childhood. The cherry on top here is if you have the camera item, you can do a photo shoot with these girls while they strike sexy poses. This is, of course, right before putting them out of their misery. There's a very weird line between sex and trauma and violence here, and I don't want to touch that line with a 10-foot pole. So with all that said, Kojima has had his share of criticism in the past about Metal Gear being sexist. When Quiet was first introduced in the trailer for the Phantom Pain, critics were quick to point out how skimpy her outfit is. Kojima doubled down on this, saying that there is an important story explanation for her outfit. Then when the game finally did release, we find that the story justification is that she is basically a big old frog who breathes through her skin, and so wearing clothes would suffocate her. Needless to say, this explanation didn't assuage the concerns from people in the Kojima is sexist camp. As for me, I like Quiet's character, and I think she fits into the Metal Gear world really well. But also, I'm not going to pretend that having a silent, subservient, scantily clad woman companion is some kind of feminist victory. Meryl's Codec. Hey, remember in the 90s when most people didn't have the internet, and if you wanted to know something obscure, you couldn't just Google it and figure it out in 5 seconds? Well, put yourself in that frame of mind for this one. Early on in Metal Gear Solid, there's a part where Snake needs to get past these cargo bay doors. Colonel Campbell will tell you to get in contact with Meryl so she could open the doors for you. He tells you that her codec frequency is on the back of the CD. And by that, he means the actual MGS jewel case, where there's a screenshot of Snake talking to Meryl. This was a cool little puzzle for players to solve back in the day, and an infuriating dead end for people who rented the game and didn't have the official jewel case. Non-canon installments. With a series as prolific as Metal Gear, it was only a matter of time before spin-offs and non-canon games popped up. Actually, the first non-canon game is the first Metal Gear itself. Well, the NES port, that is. This version was developed without Kojima, and it had to have a lot of content removed or altered to accommodate the less powerful hardware. One huge change was removing the titular Metal Gear boss fight and replacing it with a giant, immobile computer. Another non-canon game is the sequel to Metal Gear, titled Snake's Revenge. It seems that Konami's disrespecting of Kojima goes all the way back to the beginning. Made without Kojima's knowledge or consent, he only found out about Snake's revenge by chance when running into one of the game's developers on a train. The developer told Kojima what they had worked on thus far, and Kojima spent the next 24 hours thinking of a more preferable storyline. He immediately went to Konami and told them his ideas, and they greenlit the actual canonical sequel to Metal Gear, but only for Japan, as it was too late to change much for the game they were already producing. So, in America, we got Snake's Revenge, but in Japan, they got Kojima's true sequel, Metal Gear 2. Interestingly, if Konami hadn't made Kojima so paranoid about butchering his series, he may not have ever came back to it. A dick move on Konami's part, but if they hadn't done that, the Metal Gear series probably would have ended right there. Next, Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2, released on the PSP in 2005 and 2006. Notably, this one doesn't have a whole lot in common, gameplay-wise, with the rest of the series. Rather than tactical espionage action, we have ACID, which stands for Active Command Intelligence Duel. And, you guessed it, it's an action card game, which was all the rage back then. I've never played ACID, but I heard it was fun. The storyline here isn't considered canon. There's a few other ones as well, like mobile games and downgraded ports, and also Ghost Babel, which I'll cover later in the video, but really, the big one up for debate is Metal Gear Portable Ops. This game actually does hold some importance story-wise, as it officially establishes the downfall of the Fox unit, Snake meeting Roy Campbell, and the creation of Foxhound. The game was referenced briefly in MGS4, which you'd think makes it canon, but in multiple interviews, Hideo Kojima, who wasn't involved in the development, would tend to sidestep the question about the game being canonical. So, is it a mainline game? Mostly, but maybe not 100%. European Extreme. Metal Gear Solid 2 first released in America and Japan in November of 2001, but due to some delays, wouldn't arrive to European gamers until March of 2002. To apologize for the delay, their version of MGS2 came bundled with the Making of Metal Gear Solid 2 documentary DVD, as well as a new difficulty mode, aptly named European Extreme. It's a cool addition, and was bundled in the later Substance edition of the game. Although, fans have mixed feelings about it. The enemy's line of sight is a lot further, and the players can take far less damage, to the extent that the game becomes more frustrating than difficult.
Snake! Snake!
Metal Gear Solid 2 Original Ending. Metal Gear Solid 2, which was made in 2001, had to have a lot of its story changed at the last minute. I think you can guess where this is going. The story focuses on Secret Agent Raiden going on a mission to stop the terrorist group Dead Cell. It ends with Solid Snake's clone brother, Solidus, crashing a giant warship known as Arsenal Gear into Manhattan. After the 9/11 terrorist attack in real life, Kojima and his team had to quickly remake a lot of Arsenal Gear scenes, not to mention getting rid of all the World Trade Center buildings which were featured prominently in the cutscenes. A lot of the story had to be rewritten too, as what was happening in the real world was getting eerily similar to MGS2's plot. Namely, the attack on New York, Iraq acquiring WMDs, and the US president trying to start a war. Honestly, the story Kojima created was so weirdly specific to what ended up happening that it was almost prophetic. That being said, Kojima went through a hard slump knowing he'd have to change so much of his story, and he considered scrapping the project entirely. Fortunately, his team pulled him through it, and they ended up releasing the game 2 months after its original due date. To Kojima's surprise, he didn't receive any criticism about the real-life parallels, and Sons of Liberty ended up having one of the best storylines in any video game ever. And you got to do naked cartwheels. The Sorrow and the Ghosts. The Sorrow is probably the most interesting member of the boss's Cobra unit. He was a spirit medium, and during his heyday was able to reach out and use the powers of the dead. He and the boss had a baby together, but they later ended up being on different sides of a conflict, and the boss had to kill him. His remains could be seen after Snake is tossed from the bridge. When the boss and the Cobras return to Tselinoyarsk in 1964, the Sorrow aids them secretly and goes against Snake to help out the boss, because the Sorrow was still in love with her. The fight against the dead Cobra member is a creative one. Snake walks through a haunted marsh where the Sorrow summons vengeful spirits to attack. What's really cool is that the spirits that appear in the boss fight are, in fact, everyone that you, the player, killed during the game up till that point. So naturally, the difficulty of this fight will depend largely on how much blood is on your hands. If you did a no-kill run, you'll encounter no spirits at all except for the other Cobras. If you went in like Rambo, well, this is where you'll have to pay the price for that. Suzetta Miñet. Quick, who voiced Eva in Metal Gear Solid 3? You may be surprised to learn that in the credits, her voice actor is named Suzetta Miñet, and that she isn't a real person.
That motherfucker back there is not real!
It seems like Suzetta is just a fake name for whomever voiced Eva, who, for whatever reason, didn't want to be identified. Since Snake Eater's release, there's been a lot of theories about Eva's true identity. Some say it's Cynthia Harrell, who sang the Snake Eater theme song, and others say it's Donna Burke, who sang some other songs for the series. I do think Donna kinda looks like Eva in the same way David Hayter kinda looks like Snake, so I don't think this is too outlandish. The most likely candidate, though, is Jodie Benson. You may know her as Ariel from The Little Mermaid, and Jodie's voice certainly sounds like Eva's. Considering her work with kid-friendly Disney, it could simply be that Jodie didn't want her name attached to an M-rated game, or it could have something to do with being in the Screen Actors Guild and them not wanting her to take on the work, which is something that happened with the first Metal Gear Solid, where most of the cast used false names. This is all speculation, of course, because until the real Eva stands up, her true identity will forever remain a mystery. Miller's Assassin. A pretty big plot twist towards the end of Metal Gear Solid has Master Miller revealing that he was Liquid Snake in disguise the entire time, giving Solid Snake bad intel with the hopes he'd fail his mission. This revelation comes when it's discovered that the real Miller was found dead in his Alaskan home. Kazuhira Miller ended up being a huge character in the prequel games, and so his death has a lot of retroactive weight to it. The actual game doesn't specify who killed him, but it's safe to narrow it down to 3 possibilities. The most obvious is Liquid, who assumed Miller's identity. However, he may have been too busy to do this while orchestrating his heist of Shadow Moses Island. So the second option would be Revolver Ocelot. At the end of The Phantom Pain, Ocelot tells Miller that someday they'll be on opposite sides and he'll have to pull the trigger. It's pretty likely that he followed through with that threat. The third option is some unknown assassin working for Liquid. By The Phantom Pain, Kaz was a double amputee, so it wouldn't necessarily take a super soldier to perform a hit on him. The Sorrow and the Secret Camera. Metal Gear Solid 3 is well known for its Easter eggs and secrets, the most famous of these being the hidden R1 camera. During certain cutscenes, if you hold R1, you can move the camera around freely, allowing you to see things that would otherwise have been just off screen. These extra scenes are mostly goofy, like looking out the window of the Oval Office and seeing Ocelot peeping in. Man, the White House really needs to up their security. You'll also get to see the ghostly apparition of the Sorrow on a number of occasions, like after Volgin is defeated and after the boss dies. He even shows up at one point and gives you the frequency you need to escape jail. Pretty nice guy, all things considered.
You are a bad guy, but this does not mean you're a bad guy.
Metal Gear Solid 4 Original Ending. According to a 2007 GameSpot interview, Guns of the Patriots was originally going to have a pretty grim, unhappy ending. After the events of the game, Snake and Otacon would turn themselves in for breaking the law, and they would be executed as anarchists. The game was going to end with Here's to You by Joan Baez and Ennio Morricone. The song is about Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, 2 Italian immigrant anarchists that were executed for murder, a controversy at the time because many believed them to be scapegoats. A fitting song to end Snake and Otacon's legacy. However, Kojima got heavy pushback from his team about this ending, so he decided to change it. A cover of Here's to You does still play in the MGS4 credits, and the original Joan Baez version is used as a motif in Ground Zeroes, which is also fitting. This time, however, Nicola and Bart are Kazuhira and Big Boss, who also arrive at an unfortunate fate for being anarchists. Monster Hunter crossover in Peace Walker. As part of a promotional campaign to boost sales for both Peace Walker and Monster Hunter Portable 3rd, Konami teamed up with Capcom. On Metal Gear side of things, that meant a few Monster Hunter themed extra ops where Snake would fight baddies like the Velociprase, Tigrex, and Rathalos. Film director Paul W.S. Anderson, not to be confused with the far superior Paul Thomas Anderson, said the inspiration for his 2020 Monster Hunter film came from playing the Peace Walker crossover and thinking that the idea of military dudes fighting giant monsters seemed cool. Well, I've certainly heard of worse inspirations for a movie. Actually, maybe I haven't. Kerotan frogs. Hidden throughout Metal Gear Solid 3 are tiny cartoon frogs called Kerotans. If you shoot them, they make a distinctive croaking noise and do a little bobble. There's 64 hidden throughout the game, and they are definitely not easy to find without a guide. If you manage to shoot all 64, you'll unlock the stealth camo, which renders you completely invisible to enemies. In the 3DS version of the game, all the frogs are replaced with Yoshis, a fact that most people probably don't know, because nobody played the 3DS version of Snake Eater. The Cypress Statue. The Phantom Pain begins with an exciting but super tense escape from a hospital in Cyprus. XOF, who put Snake in his coma initially, comes back to finish him off for good. Or maybe just kidnap him, it's not totally clear. But either way, it wouldn't be good if they caught him. When Snake makes it out of the hospital, things get a whole lot worse when the Man on Fire appears and causes a whole bunch of destruction. Considering all the chaos happening, it'd be pretty easy to miss certain details about the environment. But eagle-eyed Metal Gear fans noticed something odd about this statue outside the hospital. Yep, that's none other than the legendary boss herself. Now, I think it's fair to say that this is an Easter egg and not meant to be a big canonical plot point. After all, it doesn't really make sense story-wise. Major Zero hid away Big Boss while he was in a coma, so having a giant statue of his mentor outside the hospital would be a pretty big indication that that's where he is. Still a pretty cool idea though, and one that a lot of fans probably missed. Killing the end early. Any Metal Gear fan worth his salt should know about the alternate way of defeating the end in Metal Gear Solid 3. One of the boss's Cobra units, the End, is notable for his extreme sniping abilities and his extreme age. When it's time for Snake to fight him, it's on the End's terms, meaning it's sniper versus sniper. This is one of the most innovative boss fights in video game history. Rather than button mashing or memorizing a pre-programmed routine, the fight with the End required both skill and a lot of patience. In fact, Kojima's original plan was for this fight to take literal weeks to complete, but his development team ixnayed that idea. Because this battle requires patience, intuitiveness, and quick reflexes, it's truly satisfying when you actually do beat him. But for those gamers that want to beat him quickly, all you have to do is save the game, push forward your PS2's internal clock, and then reload the game. When Snake discovers the End's body, he realizes that the ancient sniper died from old age. It's pretty funny, and there's some dialogue from the game calling you out for not being able to beat him in a fair fight. This is one way of beating him, but actually not the method I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about how I defeated the End the very first time I played the game, and by complete mistake. The End is first introduced in a cutscene, and once it's over, there's a few moments where he's barely in view, hidden behind some guards. They'll wheel him inside a room, and that'll be that. But if you've acquired a sniper rifle, you'll have a brief opportunity to snipe him from a distance. Interestingly, the End will have a health bar on display here, despite this not being an actual boss fight. If you kill him, his microbomb will go off and explode, and his wheelchair will come rocketing towards you, knocking you out. When I first played Snake Eater, I thought it'd be funny to see if I could shoot him from a distance, not expecting it to actually be possible. When it worked and the wheelchair hit me, I about had a heart attack from the surprise. If you kill the End early, his later boss fight will be replaced with some Ocelot unit snipers, which is not nearly as challenging. So, what sort of person are you? The type that appreciates a fair fight, or the kind that snipes at a distance? Kojima Cameos. Hideo Kojima, not unlike director M. Night Shyamalan, likes to insert himself into his games through little cameos. Let's go through all of them now. In Peace Walker, Kojima is a recruitable MSF soldier with a unique game designer title. He makes a pretty major appearance in Ground Zeroes and the Phantom Pain as a soldier that needs to be extracted back to Mother Base. In the Twin Snakes version of Metal Gear Solid, a framed picture of Kojima could be seen on the wall behind Pscho Mantis. And lastly, at the beginning of MGS4, during one of those weird-ass live-action TV segments, you can see Kojima hanging out here in the corner of the screen.
That was perfect.
Wolf urine. Kojima is well known for having, well, a lot of piss in his games. Whether it's Raiden getting pissed on, or Otacon pissing his pants, almost every MGS game has some sort of piss in it.
Piss! Piss!
But here's a more obscure one that you may not have heard of. In Metal Gear Solid, after defeating Pscho Mantis and journeying into the caves, you'll run into a pack of wild wolves that are less than friendly. But there's a weirdly specific way to get past them unharmed, and I'm honestly not sure how anyone discovered this initially, but here it is. Punch Meryl, then immediately equip the cardboard box. She'll get mad and call over a wolf to attack you, but since you're already in a box, the wolf won't harm you. Instead, it'll piss on the box. Congratulations, you now have the wolf piss box, and so long as it's equipped, other wolves won't mess with you. It's a pretty useful maneuver, and only as I'm reading this aloud do I realize how satisfying it is to say the word piss. 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 Maybe Kojima's onto something.
Right, my sympathies. Sneaking missions are called wet works for a reason after all.
Venom's snake stinks. Speaking of a stinky snake, that brings us to the next topic. In the Phantom Pain, several new features were added to enhance the game's realism. If Snake kills an enemy close range, for example, he'll progressively get covered in blood. This won't come off until you've either run through some water or taken a shower at Mother Base. Similarly, Snake could get stinky by hanging out in the dumpsters, or by just not showering for days at a time. A stinky snake will attract flies, which will in turn attract unwanted attention from enemies, making sneaking missions considerably harder. But if you're stubborn and absolutely refuse to shower, don't worry. A cutscene will unlock at Mother Base, where Ocelot, fed up with Snake's BO, tosses a bucket of water at him. Guy Savage. In Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake is tortured by the sadistic Colonel Volgan, loses an eye thanks to Ocelot being a dingus, and passes out, only to wake up as a prisoner in a Groznygrad jail cell. Definitely a low moment for our hero, so how could his day get any worse? Well, naturally he could have a nightmare on top of it. Right before Snake falls asleep, he'll have a conversation with Paramedic discussing Dracula, and Snake will reveal that he's got a healthy fear of vampires. Now if you keep playing normally here, you'll miss out on this minigame. But if you were to save, reset the game, and load up after this conversation, the minigame will begin. Guy Savage is a hunter of the undead, and he hacks and slashes through a mob of zombie policemen using these weird hook swords. You'll get about 5 minutes to play this Devil May Cry style game, and afterwards, Snake will wake up and complain to Paramedic that all her Dracula talk gave him a nightmare. For some reason, Guy Savage wasn't included in the HD edition of Snake Eater, so if you want to play it, you'll need an original PS2 copy of the game. Moai heads. The Moai heads on Easter Island are perhaps best known for being built by aliens, probably, and also for being the home for Squidward. But did you know that Moai heads are also hidden throughout the Metal Gear series? One could be found in the basement of Shadow Moses, and multiple heads could be found across the Big Shell. There's even one in Camp Omega. You don't get anything for finding these guys, it's just a simple Easter egg. A reference to the enemies in the Konami classic, Gradius, who looked like Moai heads. Hidden radio frequencies. They say that music could heal the soul, but in the case of Metal Gear Solid 3, it could also heal bullet wounds and alligator bites. Besides the special frequencies reserved for Major Zero, Paramedic, Sigint, and Eva, there's also a variety of hidden codec frequencies just waiting for the player to discover, and these frequencies are different depending on what difficulty setting you're playing on. These radio stations include Surfing Guitar, Rock Me Baby, Salty Catfish, and more. Listening to these smooth jams will slowly refill Snake's health gauge. To find these specific frequencies, hold up an enemy soldier and threaten them, and there's a chance they'll tell you the frequency. Pachinko. Hey, y'all like Pachinko, right? Right? What, you don't even know what that is? Well, I don't blame you. Pachinko is a type of gambling arcade machine that originated in Japan. It's basically just a slot machine. In 2016, Konami released a Metal Gear Solid 3 themed Pachinko game with a watered-down version of Snake Eater's storyline. Playing throughout are brand new cinematics of famous scenes from the game, recreated, presumably, with the Fox engine from the Phantom Pain. This whole machine's existence caused a lot of controversy in the Metal Gear community. Namely, why the hell would Konami develop brand new character models and animations of Snake Eater, which look amazing by the way, for a freaking slot machine? Some theorized that these assets would later be used in a Snake Eater remake, but as the years went by, that seemed less likely. In 2023, a Snake Eater remake was finally announced, but it's hard to know for sure if it's just been a long production, or if Konami literally did just build a Pachinko machine, and then 7 years later thought, oh hey, maybe we should make a modern remake. I mean, considering there are other dumb post-Kojima decisions, it's not unlikely. Developer ghosts. The Metal Gear series isn't shy about the existence of ghosts in the main storyline. The Sorrow is the most obvious example of this, but other ghosts have appeared too, like Paz in the Phantom Pain. But did you know that the ghosts of the game's developers can be found throughout the series? In the original Metal Gear Solid, the camera is a hidden item, and when you get it, you can take photos and save them on the PS1's memory card. If you take a picture in certain areas, a ghostly image of one of the developers will appear in the photo. Only one ghost, that of Kojima, appeared in MGS2. In MGS3, the developers can be seen if you take photos during the Sorrow's boss fight. And naturally, in MGS4, the ghosts show up again when you revisit Shadow Moses Island. Well, I guess technically you could say that they never left.
Yeah, don't send me creepy stuff like this. What if I get possessed or something?
Venom Snake in original Metal Gear. The Phantom Pain was a controversial entry in the series, not just because of its notorious rushed delivery, or because of the drama around the development leading to a falling out between Hideo Kojima and Konami. The game ended with a massive plot twist that wouldn't just retroactively change MGS5, but other entries in the series as well. It turns out that the player was never playing as Big Boss, but the medic from Ground Zeroes, who went down in the helicopter crash with Snake, Kaz, and Chico. In an effort to protect himself and go into hiding, Big Boss had plastic surgery performed on the medic, turning him into a body double. The real Big Boss would be able to hunt down Zero, while Skullface and whoever else was distracted with the decoy Snake. This plot twist was met with mixed reactions, because while it was a cool idea, many players felt the game had pulled a fast one on them. It's worth pointing out, though, that there were clues from the very beginning indicating this, such as the theme song of the game being a cover of David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. But what this meant for the remainder of the series was monumental. For starters, Kazuhira, up till that point, had a great relationship with Big Boss, but we know that in Metal Gear 2, they're on opposing sides. The end of the Phantom Pain makes it very clear that Big Boss abandoning Miller was enough to destroy their friendship. This would also ultimately lead to Kaz's demise, as Ocelot makes it clear to him that if he's not on Big Boss's side, he's their enemy. Years later in Metal Gear Solid, Miller would be assassinated by either Ocelot or Liquid. To get back to the point though, it seems that Big Boss's decoy, the protagonist of the Phantom Pain, also known as Venom Snake, was in fact the Big Boss that Solid Snake defeated in the very first Metal Gear game. During the events of the Phantom Pain, the real Big Boss is building Outer Heaven in South Africa, and sometime between the Phantom Pain and the original Metal Gear, Venom and the Diamond Dogs relocate to Outer Heaven. Kinda feels strange in retrospect, building and recruiting an army in Metal Gear Solid 5, only to have them be the anonymous soldiers you kill as Solid Snake in Metal Gear. World Peace. After completing the first chapter of the Phantom Pain, you'll have the option to build a nuclear weapon if you want. They don't have any practical uses in the single player, but will act as a deterrent in the multiplayer as it prevents players without the hero status from invading your forward operating base. Fans speculated wildly about what might happen should all the online players get rid of their nukes, and several MGS communities even rallied together over the years to accomplish this. Then one day in 2018, world peace was finally achieved. Well, sort of. It turns out that Konami's servers were hacked, and that prompted Metal Gear Online to register the nuclear weapons count as 0. This triggered a lengthy cutscene that had never been seen before by players, where Kaz gives a big speech about staying vigilant to preserve peace for future generations. 5 years later, the goal of nuclear disarmament was achieved for real, at least on the PlayStation 3 edition of the game. It didn't take long before people started building nukes again, but nevertheless, it was an amazing feat that nobody expected would ever happen. Vamp Eyer. Vamp is a pretty cool villain introduced into MGS2, and one of the few minor villains to survive into MGS4. However, for players who hadn't experienced Guns of the Patriots yet, it sure seemed like Vamp had died by the end of Sons of Liberty. Well, Vampire's gonna vampire, and by that, I mean, they're notoriously hard to kill. Sure enough, during an endgame cutscene after the final boss fight, if you zoom in at just the right time, you could spot Vamp in the background standing next to this car. If you're playing on a PlayStation, you'll even get a nice little trophy confirming that you're not just seeing things. Zanzibar land is Tselinoyarsk. Tselinoyarsk was a region in the south of the former Soviet Union, full of swamps, canyons, and forests, and most notably was the setting for Operation Snake Eater. This is where Naked Snake meets Eva and Ocelot and storms Groznygrad to defeat Colonel Volgan. And supposedly, the region would later be renamed Zanzibar Land. This would become the stage where Big Boss makes his final stand against Solid Snake. There's some debate as to whether this is actually the case. We know that both locations are roughly in the same area, that is, between Russia, China, and Pakistan. Both locations share the same geography, and thematically, it makes sense that Big Boss would want to build his base here. Big Boss had worked his whole life to fulfill the boss's will, so building his ultimate legacy on the same soil she died on would be a poetic tribute. The only confirmation we really have about these two locations being the same is from the novelization of Metal Gear Solid 4 by Project Ito. I don't know if this novel is canon, but considering Ito was close friends with Kojima, and Kojima wanted him to do further novelizations, I think it's fair to say that the book is probably canon, and thus all the information inside it is too. Battle Gear. For as much fuss MGS5 makes about constructing a Battle Gear, a non-nuclear combat version of Metal Gear, it's weird that you never actually get to play with one. There's a few scenes about Huey constructing it, and sure, you can use it in the text-based deployment missions, but that doesn't add up to much. Well, apparently the Battle Gear was intended to be playable, but according to notes from the official licensed art book for the game, the Battle Gear was just so overpowered that it completely broke the game. So instead, the closest thing we actually got in the game is the Walker Gear. Data miners for the Phantom Pain also found unused audio of Ocelot going into details about all the weapons and abilities that Battle Gear had. A shame we never got to see it. The Sorrow in Metal Gear Solid 4. In Guns of the Patriots, Snake faces off against Screaming Mantis, the leader of the Beauty the Beast unit. Her powers and attacks are based on Psycho Mantis from the first Metal Gear Solid, and for good reason. She was possessed by a spirit who wanted revenge on Snake. Mantis uses two marionette dolls to control people against their will. One resembles Psycho Mantis, and the other resembles the Sorrow. Interestingly, the Sorrow's voice actor appears in the game's credits, and sure enough, if you defeat Mantis, look up. In the balcony, the Sorrow will be watching you.
The spirit of the warrior will always be with you.
Moby Dick. Technically, this one may be considered more surface level, but because it involves a bunch of spoilers I didn't want to dig into yet, I saved it for now. What do the Phantom Pain and Herman Melville's Moby Dick have in common? A lot, as it turns out. The first hour of Metal Gear Solid 5 has a ton of references to the classic American novel. Both stories are about characters with an insatiable desire for revenge. Kaz wants revenge on Cypher for taking his legs and his crew into the sea, and Captain Ahab wants revenge on the Whale for the exact same reason. In the book, the whaling ship they ride on is called the Pequod, and that name is also given to your rescue helicopter. To really smack you in the face with this homage, the protagonists run away from a giant whale and escape danger by sneaking aboard a literal whaling vessel. The most interesting comparison here is the significance of Ishmael. In Moby Dick, he's the protagonist, but before long, he disappears from the story, then reappears later on from a third-person perspective, and then after the titular whale destroys the Pequod and kills Ahab, Ishmael is the only survivor. In The Phantom Pain, the man who helps you escape the hospital goes by the name Ishmael, and we later find out that this is the real Big Boss. Calling himself Ishmael is another hint, by the way, that he, not Venom, is the main character. He then disappears for the majority of the game, only making an appearance at the end after more tragedy has befallen Venom, aka Ahab. To push that further, in Metal Gear, Venom is killed, Outer Heaven is destroyed, and all that's left is the original big boss, the real protagonist, Ishmael. Moby Dick and its themes about the destructive nature of revenge was obviously a huge inspiration for Kojima. When the Phantom Pain was first teased to the world, it even was presented with a fake company name. Have you guessed it? Moby Dick Studios. Mission 51. Metal Gear Solid 5 had kind of a rocky development and was rumored to have been pushed out the door long before it could have been finished properly. Some of this thinking comes from the bad pacing of the story. The first chapter is great, but then the second chapter is a whole lot of repeating the same missions you had just played, almost as if the developers needed to pad the runtime. That, combined with kind of an abrupt ending, had fans thinking that parts of the game were almost definitely cut due to time restraints. A year later, the definitive edition was released, which included Ground Zeroes and some DLC. On top of that, a Blu-ray disc that contained cinematics for an unfinished Mission 51 called Kingdom of the Flies. In this mission, Eli steals the Sahelanthropus, and Snake goes to take it back. It provides a more conclusive ending to Eli's story, and so it's a shame that it was never finished. Chapter 3, Peace. Speaking of unfinished content in the Phantom Pain, data miners found a title card for a Chapter 3 titled Peace within the game's code. This has led to a long-lasting rumor that a whole new chapter is hidden somewhere in the game, possibly hidden behind the nuclear disarmament goal. However, with just a title card found but no other assets, it's pretty unlikely that an entire third of the story is somewhere within the game's code, undetected by all the hackers that had dug through the source code already. It's likely just wishful thinking from fans who wanted more from this game. It does beg the question though, what was the title card for? Why would just the title card be made for a third chapter, but nothing else? Chinaman and Oldboy. Metal Gear Solid 2 was full of rewrites and cut content, mostly due to the circumstantial reasons I mentioned earlier, but also to trim down Kojima's overly ambitious story. Among these cuts were two additional Dead Cell members, Chinaman and Oldboy. Chinaman joined the group due to his hatred of America, and New York specifically, due to an upbringing mired in racial discrimination. He was a Navy SEAL, and so his boss fight was going to be water-based. Actually, the Vamp fight was supposed to be Chinaman originally, and some of his skills, like running on water, were carried over to Vamp instead. Oldboy, on the other hand, was a German World War II veteran who was, well, an old boy, 100 years old to be exact. He was also going to be a mentor to Big Boss. He was scrapped pretty early in the game's development, and his traits were reincorporated into the boss and the end in Metal Gear Solid 3. According to the game's script, Chinaman and Oldboy were both killed 6 months before the Big Shell incident. So technically, these characters are canon, we just never get to meet them. MSX tape in the Phantom Pain. At the end of the Phantom Pain, Venom Snake learns his true identity as a body double for Big Boss, and that he was more or less tricked into that position. During the final scene, there's a time skip symbolized by the changing lights and the sound of a battle happening in the distance. Venom inserts a cassette tape with the title Operation Intrude N313 into a Sony SDC 500 bit coder, and a high-pitched noise plays out. Now, for anyone familiar with the original Metal Gear game, Operation Intrude N313 was the name of the mission to infiltrate Outer Heaven. By that point in time, Big Boss had come out of hiding and had retaken command of Foxhound. Foxhound was Big Boss's legitimate US government-sanctioned organization, but as we know, in secret, he was also building the anarchist Outer Heaven in South Africa. The plot of the original Metal Gear has Big Boss playing both sides, sending Snake to Outer Heaven to take it down, but also secretly trying to sabotage his efforts. He obviously didn't want his cover blown, and he expected Solid Snake would fail, but of course, Big Boss underestimated him. But back to the cassette tape. Despite hearing nothing but a high-pitched noise, the player could reasonably assume that this is Big Boss giving Venom a heads up, and that Solid Snake will be arriving shortly to ruin their Outer Heaven party. This is all fascinating, at least to me, but it isn't exactly Iceberg territory. I mean, it's just the main storyline, even if it is a big revelation. What puts this into Iceberg territory is the sound played on the bitcoder itself. For those that don't know, a bitcoder was a device that could read data-only cassettes. It was meant to work in conjunction with a computer, but if you were to play a data cassette on it, it would play that data in audio form. By analyzing the raw data from the sound played, some keen Metal Gear fans were able to figure out what the data on the cassette was. As it turns out, it's the raw data of the 1983 computer game The Portopia Serial Murder Case, a game that was a huge creative inspiration for Hideo Kojima. A pretty cool Easter egg, but here's where it gets even more interesting. Later, an update was released for the Phantom Pain, and it patches a new sound into the cassette tape, replacing the previous sound. Like before, Metal Gear fans decoded the data through the audio and found that it was the raw data for the first Metal Gear game. There's no explanation from Kojima or Konami as to why they replaced the sound, but I'd like to believe that they realized it made more sense thematically. I mean, Big Boss warning Venom about Operation Intrude by giving him the literal first Metal Gear game in data form? That's just awesome, and a great way to loop the storyline back to the very beginning. Ocelot has psychic powers from his father. One of the most ridiculous story arcs in the Metal Gear series is, without a doubt, Ocelot replacing his arm with Liquid Snake's and then getting possessed by Liquid's vengeful spirit. The Liquid Ocelot plot is confusing and kinda dumb, and it's a little unclear how much of it was real anyways, as MGS4 reveals that Ocelot had discarded the arm at some point, but I'll play devil's advocate here. Ocelot being a conduit for Liquid's soul makes sense for his character when you consider who his father was. In Snake Eater, the boss explains that she had a child with the Sorrow, and is heavily implied to be Ocelot. The Sorrow was a spirit medium that could summon the spirits of the dead and even use their powers. Ocelot could have inherited his father's medium powers and used that to summon Liquid's spirit via the arm. The Liquid Ocelot plotline gets a bit convoluted, but it at least makes sense within the logic of the Metal Gear world.
I am the arm, and I sound like this.
Chico is quiet. After Ground Zeroes, Metal Gear fans were anxiously awaiting the next installment, and when the first trailer for The Phantom Pain premiered, a new conspiracy theory was birthed. Quiet, Snake's assassin-turned-ally, was introduced without a lot of context, and notably, Chico wasn't mentioned in the trailer at all. But Chico died at the end of Ground Zeroes, so that should be the end of it, right? Well, some fans spread around the rumor that Chico actually was quiet after growing up and getting a sex change. This rumor may have started as a joke, but it certainly wasn't the most unlikely thing in the world, much less the Metal Gear world. For starters, Snake, Kaz, and the medic all survived the helicopter crash from Ground Zeroes, so why couldn't Chico? The Phantom Pain also takes place 9 years after Ground Zeroes, which would put Chico in his early 20s, which is about how old Quiet looks. They both have similar eyes and hair coloring, and although Metal Gear fans didn't know it at the time, a major plotline of the game revolves around the protagonist getting plastic surgery to assume a different identity. So, when you consider all these things, the Chico is quiet theory wasn't that crazy. Of course, when the Phantom Pain was finally released, this rumor was put to bed. Interestingly, it seems Chico was originally going to be in the game, as we learned through concept art. He was going to be an assassin character that stalks Snake, possibly to get revenge, but the idea was scrapped, probably because it was already too similar to the plotline with Volgan / the Man on Fire. To my knowledge, there isn't any information in the Phantom Pain that directly contradicts Chico being quiet, but there's also nothing to support that theory either. So hit me up in the comments if you think Chico is still out there somewhere. I want to hear from the conspiracy theory holdouts. 204863. PT, short for Playable Teaser, was a proof of concept for a horror game made by Hideo Kojima, with the twist at the end being that it was in fact a big tease for a new Silent Hill game, Silent Hills. It was going to star Norman Reedus, be directed by Kojima, and be co-produced by Guillermo del Toro. Sounds amazing, right? Well, naturally Konami scrapped it because why can't we ever just have something nice? The demo was removed from the PlayStation Online network, resulting in PT being a rare commodity, with people even selling PlayStation hard drives with the game install. Someone also made a VR version later, which I can't even imagine doing because PT is legitimately one of the scariest pieces of art / media ever created.
Oh, hell no! What the hell? Oh my god, what is... No,
What's going on? I'm not happy. I'm not happy. I hear someone breathing. I don't like this.
One of the creepy things in PT is audio you'll hear at different times with the number 204863 being said over and over. This number ends up being important for the gameplay later, but fun fact, 204863 is Kojima's birthday, August 24th, 1963. But how does that relate to Metal Gear? Well, in the Phantom Pain, in at least 2 different areas in Africa, players have found radios playing the same audio from PT. There's talk of Lisa, the ghost from that game, as well as the repeating numbers again. That's it, there's no storyline importance or anything like that, simply an Easter egg to Kojima's other project. Eyes on Kazuhira. Near the middle of the game, once you get Code Talker relocated to Mother Base, he'll occasionally mutter a few cryptic things if you're standing close enough to hear him. Most of these are innocuous, like complaining about the cafeteria food, or commenting that Ocelot's aim is off that day. But he'll also say, "Eyes on Kazuhira," a message from the Parasites, with the Japanese text being more along the lines of, "Be on your guard against him." Naturally, fans have theorized endlessly about what this message means. It could simply be Code Talker foretelling Miller's eventual turn from Venom and Big Boss. It could be referencing his actual eyes, which, I mean, his partial blindness is a small plot point in the game, so I guess that could mean something. As far as a message from the Parasites, that can mean that Kaz used the healing properties of the Parasites to help his vision. And if we really want to stretch here, maybe the Parasites are able to convey what Miller sees back to Code Talker. So when Code Talker warns Venom to keep an eye on Miller, it may be because the Parasites witnessed shady things about Miller in private. Again, it's a stretch. Honestly, this isn't by any means the most enigmatic phrase uttered in the Metal Gear series, so I don't know how it ended up on so many icebergs, but whatever. Metal Gear Solid 3 Parasites. Vocal cord parasites are a term you're going to hear a lot in the Phantom Pain, especially from this ancient Werner Herzog recruit.
A different strain from the vocal cord parasite, known as the one that covers.
A man of your skill should make short work of this.
They play a pretty significantly harmful role in the story, but they can also be used for good. Code Talker uses the parasites to prolong his very long life, and Quiet used them to keep her alive after a mortal wound. But how far back do the parasites go? According to a secret cassette tape, Code Talker says he found parasites on the End when exhuming his remains. The parasites that gave the End an unnaturally long life would do the same for Code Talker after infecting him. The End wasn't an isolated case though. The Fury apparently also was powered by parasites. I actually really like that the parasites go all the way back to the beginning, and how it parallels nanomachines and Fox Die in the later games. Was Huey innocent? This is a topic I've seen on a number of icebergs, and the short answer is no. What are you, stupid? But we'll dig into it anyways. Huey was first introduced in Peace Walker as a mechanical engineer working for the CIA. Huey is recruited by Snake, helps him stop Peace Walker, and joins MSF in their R&D department. Seems like a pretty honest bloke so far, right? Ground Zeroes opens with a planned United Nations visit to Mother Base to ensure they don't have any nukes. Huey insists on the visit happening, saying it will make them seem suspicious otherwise. He goes over Snake and Miller's heads and arranges a date for the inspection without their consent. And then, as we know, the inspection was really just a Trojan horse for Skullface and the XOF to destroy Mother Base. Over the 9 years Venom and Big Boss are in a coma, Huey is held prisoner by XOF and made to design a brand new Metal Gear for them. During that time, he gets busy with an old flame and colleague, Dr. Strangelove, and she gives birth to lovable dork Hal Emmerich. During Huey's time developing the Sahelanthropus, he uses Hal as a guinea pig to test it, as the cockpit was only big enough to hold a small child. That's oopsie number 1 for Huey. Needless to say, Hal's mom wasn't happy to learn about Huey's experiments, and she sends Hal off to live in America and away from his crazy father. To get even, Huey traps Strangelove inside an AI pod from Peace Walker, where she suffocates to death. That's oopsie number 2. Snake rescues Huey from XOF and brings him over to the new Mother Base, where Ocelot tortures him and Miller grills him about the XOF attack from years earlier. Kaz has no doubt about Huey selling them out to XOF during the events of Ground Zeroes. Huey is kind of a weaselly guy, so we're not meant to view him favorably or anything, but it's also worth noting that Kaz is clearly biased. At the end of the game, there's a vocal cord parasite outbreak, and guess who's responsible? Huey planned on selling the parasites to Cypher as a biological weapon, but needed to test his limits first. There's no real question about Huey's guilt here, I think. Miller and the rest of the Diamond Dogs want Huey executed, but Venom decides to exile him instead. Later, we learn in MGS2 that he reunited with Hal and continued raising him. But then years later, Huey would remarry and discover his son was having an affair with his second wife. He was so depressed from this that he drowned himself in their family pool, trying to take Hal's young stepsister, Emma, along with him, but only managed to kill himself. Now, I don't see a lot of people arguing that Huey wasn't a huge turd of a person, but what's really up for debate is whether he handed Mother Base over to XOF on a silver platter during Ground Zeroes, or if he was just as much a victim as the rest. The most compelling evidence that he's innocent is the simple fact that there is no evidence for or against his involvement. We never definitively find out, but Huey was always a guy that would lie to save his own skin. He lied multiple times about Strangelove's death, and he isn't above taking others down with him, as he was willing to kill his own stepdaughter just so that he wouldn't have to die alone. Huey plays the victim for most of the Phantom Pain so that you'll empathize with him, but his actions are always self-serving. So the question isn't really, did he sell out MSF? It's, would he have if the price was right? And the answer to this is, of course he would. He's a bastard. Ghost Babel was a simulation for Raiden. Did you know that Raiden didn't make his first appearance in Metal Gear Solid 2? Ghost Babel is a Game Boy Color game that came out between MGS 1 and 2. It takes place in an alternate universe where Metal Gear 2 never happened. That's Metal Gear 2, not Metal Gear Solid 2. As such, most people consider the game non-canon. However, what is canon is that Raiden went through a series of VR simulations before the events of MGS 2, and so I don't think it's crazy to think the events of Ghost Babel could also be one of those simulations. Naysayers to this theory will point out that in MGS2, Raiden doesn't seem to know what Outer Heaven is, despite it being a big part of Ghost Babel's story. On the other hand, in the same game, the AI version of Roy Campbell specifically talks about Galuad, the fortress you infiltrate in Ghost Babel. So, a bit of conflicting information here, but at the end of the special missions section of the game, Raiden, aka Jack, is directly mentioned. So, make up your own mind, but I'm firmly in the Ghost Babel was canon camp. Kaz was always working with Cypher. Kaz is first introduced in the Metal Gear series in his second entry as Master Miller, but Peace Walker is when we get to meet him in his prime. He and Big Boss met on the battlefield as enemies, but over a mutual appreciation for each other, became allies. Kaz helps Snake build MSF, but while Snake is doing it for ideological reasons, Miller more so sees it as a great business opportunity. We find out in the secret Peace Walker tapes that Kaz was at some point recruited by Major Zero as a plant with the goal of aligning Snake's goals with Cypher's. This is why he knew Paz was a double agent right away, because they were working for the same employer. Paz was also a plant, but with the goal of reuniting Snake with Zero. But when Paz stole a Metal Gear to force Snake's hand, that's effectively when Kaz broke things off with Cypher. It wasn't long after that the Ground Zeroes incident would occur, which completely wrecked Kaz's whole world, and made him hate Cypher all the more. But some fans apparently think that Kaz never stopped working for Cypher. I saw this topic on a couple Iceberg images, but without any justifications for the theory's own existence, so it's probably just BS for BS's sake. It just doesn't hold up to any scrutiny. Miller hated Cypher, and while he eventually does side against Big Boss, that doesn't mean that he was ever back on Team Cypher or anything. I don't know, if somebody could explain the logic of this iceberg to me in the comments, I'd appreciate it.
They played us like a damn fiddle!
Skullface is Psycho Mantis' father. Psycho Mantis and Skullface, two enigmatic, Halloween-faced villains that have very different storylines, but briefly share a mutual desire to kill our protagonist, whether it's Big Boss or Solid Snake respectively. When Mantis was a child, he worked for Skullface in the XOF, but would later defect and indirectly kill his boss. Some people think that he may have committed patricide, and here's why. When Mantis discovered his powers, he blacked out, and burnt down his home village, killing his father in the process. In the Phantom Pain, Mantis turns against his boss and used the Sahelanthropus to crush him to near death. I guess because Skullface would have been old enough to be Mantis' dad, and the fact that they were in the same place at the same time, and the fact that Mantis kills him, that's led people to draw connections. The problem, of course, is that we know exactly why Psycho Mantis killed his father. Preemptive self-defense. In Metal Gear Solid, Mantis tells Snake that his mother died in childbirth, and he was able to read his father's mind. His father despised him and wanted him dead, and so Mantis killed him first. There's nothing in the Phantom Pain that indicates Skullface had any sort of familiar connection with Mantis. I guess someone could make the argument that we just don't see it in the game, but the biggest contradiction here is how Skullface dies. He doesn't die in a fire, which Mantis specifically said is how his father died. Skullface dies being crushed by a giant Metal Gear, and then being shot by Huey. The only other explanation for this theory is the origin of Skullface's deformity. He says that in World War II, during an Allied bombing, he was caught in a factory explosion and received intense oil burns to his face. Some fans theorize that this matches with Mantis' story better, except for the fact that it happened at least 20 to 30 years before Mantis was born. Either way you slice it, this theory just isn't correct. Everyone is Decoy Octopus. This one is more of a running gag within the Metal Gear community at this point, but let's address it anyways. In Metal Gear Solid, Decoy Octopus is one of the 6 Foxhound members that start the revolt with Liquid on Shadow Moses Island. He had a superhuman ability to disguise himself as other people, even going as far as to inject himself with their blood, which, I mean, how would that help unless he's trying to trick like a dog or something? When the Shadow Moses revolt begins, Ocelot accidentally, that's accidentally in quotes, tortures DARPA chief Donald Anderson to death, trying to get information out of him on how to activate Metal Gear. Of course, we find out later that Ocelot killed him intentionally, as Donald Anderson, aka Sigint, was also a fellow patriot and would blow Ocelot's cover as a double agent, or a triple agent, or a quadruple double stuffed Oreo agent. I can't remember anymore. But anyways, Decoy Octopus disguises himself as Sigint so that he could ask Snake what he knows about Metal Gear. Not long after, Snake's Fox Die kills Decoy Octopus. Because he was in disguise the whole time, the player never actually gets to see Octopus's real face. That led a lot of conspiracy theorists to realize, hey, Decoy Octopus could have been anyone up until his death. Skullface? Could have been Decoy Octopus. Roy Campbell? Could have been Decoy Octopus. Sam Porter Bridges from the bridge-making game in Iceland, the Walking Dead guy? Obviously, it's Mr. Puss in Disguise, Mr. Octopus. Code Talker trained Raiden. As the title suggests, this theory is about who trained Raiden in the events between Sons of Liberty and Guns of the Patriots. Apparently there's a small bit of dialogue in the later game where Raiden talks about being trained in Alaska by a Native American shaman, but I couldn't find that specific clip, so take all of this with a grain of sand, or a grain of salt, whatever the expression is. Some fans have theorized that the shaman must be Code Talker, Snake's Navajo ally from the Phantom Pain. The only problem with this is that Code Talker was born in 1880, and the time period Raiden was training was between 2009 and 2014, which would make Code Talker like 130 years old. Yes, he's already a century old in the Phantom Pain, and he's doing pretty well because his parasites are keeping him alive, but 130 seems like a stretch even for Metal Gear standards. I think the Native American shaman in question is just that, a random guy. But if everything needs to be connected, then it was probably more likely a relative of Vulcan Raven, one of the Foxhound members that revolted in the first Metal Gear Solid game. He was Native American and in Alaska, and so the idea that he may have had like a son or something in the area isn't too crazy. Secret Vlog number 36. To keep fans busy while MGS5 was in development, Konami released a series of videos on the game's official website, or at least the Japanese version of the site. These video blogs would cover everything from basic cardboard box mechanics to Metal Gear Online content. Right now there are 36 entries on the vlog, but the last one is inaccessible and merely has a thumbnail that says confidential. It's been a long time since The Phantom Pain was released, and it's a fair bet to say we aren't getting any more new content for it. But strangely, that last vlog is still missing. There's a lot of theories on this, but I'm going to cover what I think are the 3 most likely explanations. The first is that there is no vlog number 36. It was made as a tease to troll Metal Gear fans and leave them wanting more. It's the developer's way of telling us, you feel like there should be something there, but there isn't, and that makes you remorseful. It's a Phantom Pain, get it? Now, shut up and play this Pachinko machine while we cancel PT. We're Konami, and there's literally no bottom to our infinite abyss of bad decision-making. The second answer is that it has something to do with Kojima himself. Maybe it was like going to be a thank you for playing kind of message from Kojima, but after his parting with Konami, they scrapped it. This isn't unlikely, considering Konami's decision to retroactively scrub Kojima's name off of Metal Gear, as we saw in the recently released Metal Gear Solid Master Collection. The third answer, which I think is also just as likely, is that it has something to do with nuclear disarmament. There was only one legitimate instance of the scene triggering, on the PS3, remember? But Konami later claimed that this was illegitimate and achieved by cheating. I'm not going to get into the validity of that in this video, only pointing out that Konami didn't count it as valid. So it's possible that true nuclear disarmament may be the trigger needed that sends the signal to Konami's website to publish the unlisted Vlog 36. The vlog would probably say, you know, congratulations on reverse Oppenheimering the world. I didn't think that this would ever happen, so here's a treat. Here's photos. We got a Bigfoot and Area 51, and here's the real reason we fired Kojima. Spoiler alert, it's because of our hubris. The truth really is that we'll probably never know the truth about Vlog 36, and over the years I've learned to live with that, and hopefully you can make peace with that too. Wait a minute. Make peace. Chapter 3, Peace.
Chupacabras, the goat killer of Mexican folklore. Folklore is stories from the past that are often fictionalized. Fictionalized to heighten drama. Drama student. Students at colleges usually have bicycles. Binary. It's binary code!
Well, that was the Metal Gear Solid Iceberg. Thanks to everyone that stuck around till the end. I read and respond to all the viewers' comments, so if you leave a comment, I will respond. I will not ignore you. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, and if you hated the video, hit the like button anyways. I'm thinking about doing a series of retrospectives for each Metal Gear game after this, but that will depend largely on how well this video does, so if you want more Metal Gear content from me, let me know in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.